Welcome to the Lara Jane Layton Show. This podcast is for you, the person who keeps putting others first. Your self-talk has held you back. You no longer need to take a second seat. Let's explore ways to overcome self-doubt. You can silence that inner bully voice and achieve your full potential. Here's your host, Lara Jane.
Hello, friend. I am so excited to be here with, help me with your name, Elana. Elana. I keep having to think Nirvana.
Yes, Elana rhymes with Nirvana.
Elana is my new friend, and I'm so excited to have her in our tribe and someone here to help share wisdom with us. And the cool thing I like about this subject is you and I, we're people pleasers. We try so hard to make everybody around us happy that we forget about ourselves. And we're here to talk about how to start having our own yeses and nos and setting our boundaries and stop the people pleasing. It's okay to make people happy, but they don't have to come first. So help us get out of this people pleasing mode. I'm so excited.
Yes, I'm super excited too. I love talking about this topic, partly because I'm a recovering codependent and people pleaser that took a lot of years to learn that I too matter and that I can't please everyone, and that pleasing myself first is the most important thing because I am the only one I have to live with 100% of the time.
You are stuck with you whether you like it or not. So let's learn to like it.
Yeah, exactly. And you're the only one you live with. And I had this really actually powerful moment where two different people were responding to me completely differently around the same thing, around me showing up the same way. And one person was displeased with me and one person was pleased with me. And I realized at that moment, I can't please everyone here, right? Like this person thinks I'm great. This person thinks I'm horrible. And then I decided, well, what do I want to choose? I think I'll go with the person that likes how I'm being, right? But also I get to choose, and it's not really actually in my power to control what other people think about me. Because if I think I get it right over here, it's going to be wrong for somebody else. And so if I can find an anchor inside of myself and my own compass, I'm going to be a whole lot better off, going to feel a lot more peaceful and be able to navigate through the world a little bit easier, I would say.
So tell us about your journey of the transition. Did you lose a lot of people in your life as you started to set your boundaries? Or did you find the right people to stay with you? Or both?
Maybe a bit of both, right? Like I have had a lot of relationships fall away, but I realized also they fell away because they were kind of one-sided in some ways. I was the one doing all the extending, all of the giving, all of the pleasing. The thing with certain dynamics is if you're constantly the giver and the other person is the taker, that's the relationship. And if you stop giving, the relationship goes away, right? In some instances. And people are, of course, happy to have your help and have your contribution and show up in their lives, but they're in their own journey. Maybe they're like, just for me, it was like people who were basically drowning and hardly able to keep their head above water. And I was trying to throw them a lifeline. They're not going to have something to turn around and give back to me. So of course, if I'm not feeding that and being that person, there's not much of a relationship. But it's been an up level, right? And a shift to where can I be in relationship with people that actually do have something to give back to me, where it can be more of a sense of mutuality, more a sense of connectivity, and not always me trying to be indispensable to them in some cases, right? Because I think in my experience, both personally and working with other folks, is like it comes down to fear of rejection and fear of abandonment. And like at the deepest level, we're working out an old, deep childhood wound that says, like, please love me and I need to keep you close. And if you don't like me, or if you're not going to be there for me, then I'm not going to be okay and I'm not going to survive. And as a kid, that might have been a really great strategy to help you survive, right? You needed your parent to survive. You're going to do everything in their power to keep them connected to you, because if they disconnect, you're dead, basically, right? But we carry that into adulthood, into time and space when we're capable of taking care of ourselves in a lot of ways. So those are some of the, pieces that for me, like, wow, okay, let's rework this.
I'm going to use an analogy, and I think it fits for this
Great.
situation, is we're all water, right? Every one of us, we're the same.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter who
Yeah.
you are, where you're at, we're water. Some of us may
Mhm.
be in a solid situation. Some of us may be steam. Some of us may be liquid. Some of us, there's these different variable parts of where we're at in life or our mood right now.
Mhm.
And when you take steam and ice and you put them together, they don't blend. And the steam can do everything it can to not upset the water. I mean, the ice, but it's going
The
to
ice.
affect one another. Yes. And so as you
Mhm.
find these different vibrational patterns within people, there might be one person that is really comfortable with all the solid people and another person that's really comfortable with all the steam and the other ones that are liquid. And that's your tribe. That person that you don't have to
Mhm.
change with is your tribe. But guess what? You might change. And as you change, your circles
Right.
change. I need to be more with the steam people today, or today I need to be around my water people, because that's when my energies are in harmony with one another. And so as you start to realize that this is my authenticity right now, that doesn't mean you're not going to change tomorrow or the next day. We evolve. It's okay to be water. It's okay. I mean, liquid.
Absolutely.
It's okay to be ice. It's okay to be stream. It's finding the group that like you the way you are is going to make it the easiest for you.
Yeah. And to like you the way that you are, and to like, I don't know if this is true for you, but I went through this place of like, if I didn't feel comfortable with people, or if it wasn't matching up for me, I always went to the wrongness of me. That somehow, like, what's my problem that I don't enjoy these people more? What's my problem that whatever it was, instead of feeling like, oh, this is just information that's telling me that there's some sort of mismatch, and I get to choose what feels good for me, what feels easeful for me, what feels expansive for me, all those kind of things. Like, my feelings are actually here to give me information about how the world around me impacts me. I can internalize that and use it to navigate my choices. And that was a big switch for me, to be like, no, it's not always me. It's not always my fault. It's not like, this is just information. And if I
We're
use
just
it, then
different
I
right
can
now.
navigate toward the things. Yeah. They can feel better. That can feel more like that. Yes. Like, okay, this maybe just feels like a no. There's nothing wrong with no or yes. It's like, I'm just not jiving here. Let me go somewhere that feels like a little easier for me, or like is my type of water. I love that analogy,
To
because
me,
it's
it
like
makes
all the
so
same
much sense.
substance.
Yeah, we're all the same. We just vibrate different. And we might, who
Yeah.
cares? It doesn't make the
Yeah.
ice wrong.
We take on different forms.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's okay.
absolutely. Yeah. And it's okay. Like, it doesn't make the ice wrong, and it doesn't make you wrong if don't want to be in an icy space, right? It's like, you're just in a different form right now. Maybe you're a waterfall, and being the ice just cramps your style because you just want to rage and flow. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing. It's just a difference.
So in your journey, as your environment changed, and now you're being better at being your authentic
Mhm.
self and knowing your yeses and knowing the people that make you feel comfortable, and knowing that, it's kind of fun to be around the ones that give you that stretch to help you grow. And I love being around those
Mhm.
people. It's the ones I feel like want me to step back. Quit being so happy. Why are you always so happy? Don't know.
Yeah.
I just am. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't need, you
What's
don't need to change that.
There was this thing that somebody said to me once. It's like, people will judge you when you are being more than they're willing to be themselves, or greater than they're willing to be themselves, or because they're judging, some part of you as being something that they're not willing to be or uncomfortable to be. And I also say to myself, like, don't diminish yourself to be with other people. And that's been a lesson for me for a lot of years, is like, don't reduce yourself or diminish yourself just to be with other people. Invite them to something greater, or if necessary, have the strength to stand alone, but don't give up yourself just for a sense of connectivity or belonging, because ultimately it doesn't work. I mean, I think I've had some relationships that have sort of like imploded in a certain way because there was too much of that, right? There was too much of me accommodating and trying to make it work and being flexible, and it went too far away from the core of who I am and what I really care about and my authenticity, and it became exhausting and it no longer worked. And then we had a sort of false premise for our relationship at the end of the day. So I think, being with yourself and connecting with yourself and your own authenticity is really the most essential. It's like, again, I come back to, you're the only one you have to live with 100% of the time. So make it good and make it so you're in integrity and in truth with yourself, because at least you have that. I think there's like a pride, or for me, like, I used to question my intention, how I came across, how I affected people, all this kind of stuff, and was ripped to shreds if somebody was displeased with me or unhappy with me. And so, like, it was just heart-wrenching. And I realized at some point, like, I can only come from the best place I know how to come from inside of myself and act with an integrity for myself. And if it's still not working for some person, if it's still not right, I can rest in the assurance and the peace that I came from the best place I knew how, and I acted from integrity. And that has helped me a lot in my life, to just be like, sort of gut check, mind check, like, okay, was I acting in integrity here? Did I come with good intention? Did I mean well? And ultimately, if I can say yes to all of those things, then if somebody else is still upset with me or takes an issue with me, I don't internalize it and beat myself up so much anymore, because I'm clear. I'm clear that I did the best I could with what I had, and that I came from a good place. And to me, that makes such a huge difference.
So as corporate women, we
Yeah.
don't always just fear not being liked. We also fear not having a
Mhm.
job tomorrow if I'm not liked.
Yeah.
And how do I still enjoy? I'm trying to think of what the right word is. How do I step back and not people please to my own boss? There is, whether you're the CEO or the COO, there is someone in charge of you. CEO has the board members that they have to report to. Where does
Yeah.
that level
Mhm.
of, I'm not people pleasing, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job? And there's kind of that balance of, how do I become authentic when money's involved?
Yeah. And that can be a place that requires a lot of courage, right? Because there are certain work cultures that are set up to, be codependent or highly dysfunctional even, right? And so can you find the realm in which you can kind of walk a fine line, right? Where you're still figuring out some degree how to honor yourself and how to take care of yourself, how to work with the situation in a way that it isn't just demoralizing or draining or exhausting and isn't reactionary, right? Some of what happens when we're like wanting to come out of people pleasing is we go the opposite direction and like, F you, I'm like, don't tell me what to do. Like, I'm not available, right? You can get kind of belligerent, which can be a healthy phase to go through. However, if you're in a work environment, that might cost you your job, right? So then I think the work becomes getting really connected with yourself. What are your boundaries? What are your absolute yeses and nos, right? Can you find a way to work within the parameters or the expectations that makes it still functional? Are the assumptions that you have about what you have to do accurate? Sometimes we have a notion or a sense of what is expected that might actually be a little bit different. And maybe we can actually set some boundaries without the repercussions that we fear. So there is a little bit of checking out what is reality and what is your story, because sometimes those are not the same.
I think one of the things I'm feeling at the moment is that that moment when I have a hell no, and I'm being asked to do something and I'm feeling stressed over my response. Like, what do I do? That immediate. And I think the most important thing is to be honest. Right now, I have other things that are more important and I cannot do this. What other things on my plate would you like to adjust that are within your realm? And give your boss the opportunity to change things up. I think until we can feel the power of, I need to be honest to myself, let them decide which one, because I still have to have my home life.
Yeah.
I still have to have my personal life,
right?
And give them that.
And understanding. I mean, I think understanding where your hell no comes from, like that's like when you said that, my first feeling is like, okay, let me tap into what is this no about, right? Is it a boundary with how much time I'm putting in? Is it something I feel ethically or morally questionable? Is it something that just is a growing edge for me that's like so uncomfortable? Like, what is that really about? And can I tap into what is the real discomfort here? And what is my real need here? And because sometimes we react to the conditions or the strategies or so forth. But if I can get in touch, and I think I really like what you were saying because it sort of lends itself to this, like, what is my real need? My need is that I have no more time in my schedule. I am, every minute of my day is maxed out. My no is like in response to, I cannot fit another thing in. So then, yes, I can come back and say, look, I don't know where, like, I understand that you want me to do this. I don't know where it fits in the time I have to do everything else that I'm doing. So can you help me find a way that I can also do this and still do everything else and still have time to be with my family, for example, right? And so that's like also an invitation where you've really honored what your need is, what is important to you. And then you've invited your boss, whoever that person is, to problem solve with you and support you in finding a workable solution, right? So that can be a strategy, is to bring somebody along instead of just like saying no and like putting a stop sign up to them. You're bringing them alongside you to help you resolve and solve the dilemma or the conflict that you're in. And so in a way that like everybody hopefully ultimately can be happy, instead of just saying, oh, I will just stuff my needs yet again and do what this person is asking me. And I will just put myself on the back yet again, maybe with a sigh, maybe with some begrudgment, but like when you can really say, you know what, actually, I get to honor myself here too. And I'm curious what the way forward can be that includes me in this experience.
Like, I'm kind of getting an idea. We actually are talking about little steps and baby steps we can take to refocus that. I am overwhelmed. I'm trying to please everybody and I'm going to be burnt out in a moment if this doesn't happen. And so, what are the steps that we could come up with that would say, it sounds like we've talked about reflection and figuring out what is our why and everything. So, what I want to do is take a quick break. I want to come back and I want to talk about what are these steps that we could go through that I could say, first of all, I got to identify what. Be right back.
This podcast is sponsored by Lara Jane Coaching. You know you're ready to silence your inner bully voice. Let Lara Jane support you with coaching. To schedule an introduction call, go to larajanelayton.com.
This is going to be fun. So in my brain, I'm like, got all these steps we've talked about. And it's like, if I don't know my priorities, so if I can do some self-reflection and I can identify some priorities, then all of a sudden I know where things fit. So what are the steps that you went through in order to stop that people-pleasing mode and become more honoring your own self?
Yeah. So the way that I describe it is like, there was a time in my life where I kept falling off the cliff. And then I would realize I fell off the cliff. I would blow up my life, I can't do this anymore, run away from the world, right? And then I would take like 5 days to myself. And then I'm like, oh, I feel like a little bit sane again. And so the process was recognizing when I'm approaching the cliff. And, maybe I see as I'm falling off. And then I'm like, okay, I'm coming near the edge. Let me pull back a little. So the cliff might be burnout. It might be, people pleasing to exhaustion, all that kind of stuff. I did several workshops around boundaries. And one of the things we talk about is knowing when your boundaries are crossed, right? Being able to tell the warning signs, there's kind of 3 phases, right? You can tell the warning signs before you're about to do it. You can see the signs while you're doing it, or you see the signs after you're doing it. So I think that step number 1 is just really recognize that dynamic in yourself. When have you abandoned yourself? When have you said yes when you wanted to say no? When have you just automatically put yourself last and somebody else first? Because if you don't see the pattern and if you're not aware of what's happening, for a lot of us, it's so ingrained and so automatic that we're often until reflection or the cost has been so great is when we're reflecting on it and being like, oh, shoot, I did that thing again. So the more you can start to pay attention to the little cues that you might be heading toward that edge, that's going to be like a big piece of it. And then looking at, where am I saying yes when I want to say no? What does it feel like to really include me? Right?
A lot of people don't know that at all.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so automatic for so many of us to just say yes, to just put other people first, to all that kind of stuff. So it's like creating some space so it's not so incredibly automatic. Take a pause, right? If somebody, some people even can institute like a policy if somebody calls them up asking for a favor or volunteer for something, said, you know what, let me think about it. I'll get back to you tomorrow, right? Because that's just giving the space to not habitually say yes. And then,
I love that
in 24 hours, in 24 hours, you might be like, what was I thinking? I can't take on another thing. And it gives you the space, right? It gives you the space to process and to reflect on what am I actually doing here? So that can be a powerful first step. And then, so there's the recognition that there's the pattern, there's the understanding of where you are, what is your yes and what is your no. And then I think going along the path, there comes a place where there's the courage, because some of us know, I don't want to do this. I say yes anyway.
Yeah.
I don't want to do this. But I'm going to be there. And the compulsive, habitual, even though you know better pattern, to me, has its roots in very deep subconscious programming. It goes back to what I was talking about before, has to do with the child who's afraid of abandonment and that they won't survive. But a lot of us are not even at the point that we recognize even that that's a thing. But if you get to the point where you're like, oh, I know, I full well know I'm still saying yes, I'm still doing people pleasing, even though I don't want to, and I can't seem to stop, that's when some deeper healing work might be really helpful. But there's a lot of steps up until that point to say, even just know what you're doing and be able to make a different choice, because if you don't see it, you can't choose different.
So it's sounding like I could do this step like, oh my gosh, I have just fallen off the cliff. Let me self-reflect and figure out what happened going up to that point. And now how do I find my way back? So we're not going to know what triggered us off the cliff until we start reflecting after we've fallen. And then you start watching for those clues. And maybe you're right at the edge and you go, oh my gosh, guess what? I recognize this. Let me step back. And I love that. Give me 24 hours and I'll let you know, because that means I want to commit. I want to make you happy right now. But if I get 24 hours, that's going to give me a moment to articulate who I am into the scenario of me first. And I know that sounds selfish, but if you don't take care of you, you run out of steam to take care of everybody else. And so it's like, okay, I'm at that border. Now I know this trigger. And I think the longer and the better, and the more often you take the time to self-reflect, the sooner you're going to recognize it. Because at night, was there anything, like, I don't know, do you do a meditation practice? Do you do yoga? What is your self-reflection process that you use?
Yeah. I do meditate. I mean, at this moment in time, I think I've just gotten really clear on my boundaries and my yes and my no. So it's not like that piece of the process is not as big. But yeah, there was a time when I was really having to pay close attention to when I was getting close to my edge, when I had overextended myself so much that I just couldn't, like, it got to the point where I just can't handle life anymore. I can't handle people. I'm grouchy. And there are things that you can start to notice as your symptoms, right? These are the things that happen when I am people pleasing. And I do have if anybody's interested, I do have a workshop that I did that goes through some of that. It's been a long time, so I'm not remembering exactly what I delineated, but it's like, these are the signs that you're about to people please. These are the signs that you're in it. But if you can notice your own triggers and your own flags and be like, oh, okay, I'm doing that thing again, that's a warning that I need to pay attention to myself and I need to take a step back. And so for me, it was like just getting frazzled, getting what I call wobbly. Okay, I need to just have a day to myself or whatever that is. Now I don't have to get to the point where it's like crash and burn and off the cliff. So that's a big piece of it, right? Is to really pace yourself and listen for yourself and get to know, like, what does it feel like to say yes and to say no inside myself? And maybe you start with smaller things, right? Or like if there's a compulsion to say yes for it, because some of us is a compulsion, it's like, notice the place when you're saying yes, when you want to say no. And I mean, even just start with observing that. You're like, okay, what is this?
I think we can also not just that feeling, but who is it that is around at the time? Because we may have a particular person that is our trigger. And you could be in a boardroom meeting and everything's going great. And one person walk in or show up or say something and you're triggered. And so it may not be whether you're saying yes or no, but it may be that you just felt your boundary crossed. It's, I don't want to hear this. And you get triggered and you start wanting to withdraw. And just knowing the people, you can go in prepared to, I know this person's going to be in the meeting. I know I can breathe through this. What
Mhm.
is and I know that I try to say we need to prevent things, but there are times when we need coping mechanisms. We need
Yeah,
something that's going to get
absolutely.
us through the situation because we do want to stay employed. We do want to do these things, but there's things that are going to push us over the edge if we don't.
Yeah.
I breathe through everything as like breath work to me is
Yeah.
the best thing. And you can do it on the down low when nobody knows what you're doing.
Right. We all have to breathe. And I think like recognizing those triggers and understanding where they come from and what it is, like what is it in me that gets ruffled by this person or agitated or like what makes me so uncomfortable about this situation or this person? Is it my own fear or my own stuff? Is it like one of the things I learned is that when you get angry, it's usually because somebody is invalidating you or crossing a boundary or lying to you. And that has been so, so helpful for me because I'll feel a level of trigger or agitation or irritation by somebody. And just like my heckles will go up. It's like, oh, they just did something that was totally invalidating. And that's why I'm feeling pissed off. Okay. And then I go, well, I don't actually need their validation. I can validate myself. Thank you very much. And now I understand what upset me in that instance. And let me take my power back and let me reclaim my validation or like get out of that weird, funky energy and come back to like, I'm good. Right. And,
Right.
some of it is inner work, some of it's your own personal stuff that they trigger, and some of it is just like sometimes people are difficult and have egos or whatever shtick that they do that is problem for you. But I mean, in everything in my life and in my work, I'm always around where can I find my power? Whatever it is. Sometimes it's just an attitude. Sometimes it's in, let me get to the bottom of this and understand why this is affecting me so much so that I can shift and heal it. Sometimes it's like, I need to speak up for myself. But really, how do I maintain my sense of agency and my sense of power in any situation that I'm in? And that is like also powerfully saying yes and no and knowing. I mean, what we're talking about so much is like knowing yourself and knowing your internal landscape so that you're aware of what's happening and you're aware when you're, I mean, to me, people pleasing in a lot of ways is about giving up power or trying to, I think on the flip side of it is trying to gain power or recognition or validation, whatever that is, through being liked, through being whatever. If you can know that you get to have that and it's not about what you can accomplish with other person, then there's a lot more choice around how you show up. And I had a moment where I realized I had this one person in my life and I realized I was mostly just being friends with her because I felt sorry for her and was doing a lot of people pleasing kinds of stuff. And I realized, you know what? Like that's a really shitty way to be with somebody. And I would hate it if somebody were in my life because they felt sorry for me, or even like in a broader sense, obliged, or you were talking about how it's selfish, like in quotation, selfish to put yourself first. And yet, if you think about people who show up and do things for you who don't really want to do it, who aren't honoring their yes and their no, who are overriding themselves and being a people pleaser, like how fun is that to actually receive from that person, right? There's a whole bunch of like weird other strings attached, right? So if you're, doing it because you think you have to, or because nobody else will, or like there's a certain heaviness, right? That comes when you say yes, when you want to say no, that has an impact. I mean, if you really think about it, has an impact on other people. So actually, when you honor your yes and your no, and you are able to say yes with joy and clarity, it's going to be such a greater contribution and such a more pleasant experience for the people around you when you come from that space. And now, of course, certain people who are intent on benefiting from your people pleasing are going to be pissed off when you say no. They're going to judge you. They're going to tell you that you're selfish, that you're a bad person, all that kind of stuff, because they really benefit from you having no boundaries and giving everything to them. So that's also, I think, a big contender. And for certain people is like, well, I say no, and then, I get all this pushback. Yeah. People are used to you having no boundaries and saying yes all the time, are going to initially be upset when you start saying no. And so that's something to navigate through and to say, you know what, actually, like, I get to exist. I mean, research shows that people who do not learn to also include themselves end up often with chronic illness, with cancer, with disease, like all these kinds of things. I mean, I was just listening to a book by the author Gabor Mate, and some of the statistics he's sharing about, over pleasing personality types and the ability to diagnose by personality who would end up with cancer or some other condition and who wouldn't, was like something like 95% accuracy, which blows me away. But there's real significant costs when we don't learn how to also take care of ourselves and know that we matter, right? Often it doesn't have to get to that point, but like chronic self-denial does show up in your body.
So, and let's summarize what we've talked about. So,
sure.
And I'm just trying
to, right?
like, we've talked about a lot, but I'm going to try and put it in order. So in order to stop this people pleasing, first we need to self-reflect and identify our priorities and identify where our boundaries are going to be. Know that your first attempt at this may change. You may say, oh, I was okay with this, but you're going to put some lines in the sand. This is where I'm at. Now you're going to pay attention. Did I fall off the cliff? If I fell off the cliff, I'm going to self-reflect and go, where is it that I let my priorities not become what's the most important? So now I'm going to go,
or abandon myself for the well-being of somebody else.
Right. And what was it? Think about it. Now start watching for that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to start, as we get nearer, now we're going to come up with a new plan. Instead of getting frustrated, I'm going to tell myself, is this true? Or whatever cycle you want to go to. Is this something that was really, it's your response. Yeah. Someone can on purpose try to make you feel bad, but your response is what counts, right? And so start learning new responses.
And in that phase is also like just starting to recognize your own personal warning signs or like signals. You're like, oh, this is an indication that I'm about to abandon myself for someone else. This is an indication that I'm going toward the cliff, and let me pay attention to those signals and those signs. And you can make your own list so that okay, when this happens, it means we're headed toward disaster or a place that we don't want to go. So really getting to know that territory is super important.
Right. And as we reflect, now we're not falling off the cliff. Now we can find ways to even avoid the cliff. So all of this is that personal reflection, that planning ahead, and knowing, when is it that I am not following through with my boundaries? Because nobody else knows them. You are the only one that knows your boundaries. You're the only one that can set them. What's that or that quote out there as, you are the one that teaches other people how to treat you. And if you set your boundary and you say no, they're going to know not to ask, and you're going to find less resistance in the long run when you start teaching and showing them, I have new boundaries. So do you have some last minute steps, words of wisdom, or something you would like to share with our friend that's
Well,
with us
the thing
today?
that comes up with what you just said, which is that boundaries are always for you. They are never for the other person. The people say, I set these boundaries and then the other person doesn't respect them and so forth. Boundaries are always for you. It's about what you will or won't do. It's about how you will or won't respond in the face of a certain thing. Like, if you continue to speak to me in that tone of voice, I will leave the room. If you call me when you're drunk, I'm going to hang up the phone, right? It's what I will do and how I will honor myself and my needs and my boundary and what the consequences will be when certain people engage in certain ways. So I think that's really important to just know that you are the one that is in charge of your boundaries. You are the one that gets to set them and to make the necessary choices if people are not honoring them to ensure that you're taking care of you.
Well, and nobody's going to honor them. No, I mean,
Right?
you can say people are going to be
Would you please
themselves.
respect my boundaries? Yeah.
It's like, it's just
Yeah.
going to
I
happen.
mean,
And
yes. And in maybe healthy mutual relationship, they're like, oh, I didn't know that was an issue for you. Like, thank you for letting me know. I will do my best not to do whatever the thing is that is upsetting. Right? That's great. But most of the people in your life are not going to be that person. They're going to be the person that does the annoying thing, no matter how many times you tell them that you don't like it. And so then it's your chance to say, well, I don't have to keep putting myself in this situation. And that's my boundary. So
it is
yeah,
your
absolutely.
responsibility to articulate those boundaries to the person that is going to be. It's like, I had a boss, and it's like, on this day of the week, I always have to leave at this time. There's no question, this is the date. And when they question, like, we need you to do this, remember, this is the one that's not movable. So if you set the stage, it's easier to push back later because it's not their responsibility to honor it. It's yours to keep it. And if you've said it, it's yours to say, hey, remember, we talked about this. You don't have to be rude and say, remember. But we've talked about this before, and this is what I can't do. This is where it is. And I personally really do believe that people respect you more when you stand up for your boundary than when you let them push you around.
I believe so as well, and respect you, are inspired by you. Just for a moment, like, think of that person who has a lot, if you think of the person who's the overhelper, people pleaser, and then you think about the person that is really clear about what works for them and what doesn't. And, like, first of all, which person would you rather be in a relationship with? In any sort of relationship, which person feels more attractive to you? Which person feels more inspiring to you? And I know, like, I have so valued friendships in my life where the person is taking full responsibility for their needs and their boundaries, because I can relax. I don't have to worry that they're saying yes when they want to say no, that there's going to be hidden resentments, that there's underlying subtext that I'm not reading. It's just really clear. You're honoring yourself and taking care of you. And if it's not going to work for you, you'll let me know. And then we get to navigate forward. And it's just such a different type of relationship that I've so deeply appreciated in my life. And so it's a gift. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you having clarity about your yes and your no, and showing up when it's right for you and good for you and works for you. And now there's times you'll stretch because you want to be a caring person and somebody's in real need, and that's okay. That can also be a yes for you. But it's actually a real gift to the people that you're in relationship with, because they then stop bearing the burden of the responsibility for your well-being in some way. And there's just, to me, it's an experience of so much more space in the relationship and trust to know, because I would never want, if I really am caring for someone, I would never want them to to do something out of a sense of obligation or resentment toward me. That would feel horrible. And if I know from experience that they're very good at honoring their boundaries and honoring their yes and their no, I'm going to feel that much more comfortable asking them because I know that they'll say no if it's not a fit for them. And it's just so much more ease and so much more, to me, satisfaction. And like, there's an ability to have an authentic, honest, clear, and close relationship with someone who is being that honest with themselves that is missed if there's all this mucky people pleasing going on.
You're reminding me of a story about my granddaughter. And there was a time I'd taken her to several movies. We'd done a lot together, and she's only 12 right now. So she's still young. At the time, she was probably 6 or 7. And I like, hey, would you like to go to this movie with me? And her adult response was, Grandmommy, that's not one of my interests. Okay. Like, how much better could anybody set a boundary? Like, she could have just said no, and I wouldn't have known. She could, she didn't say, no, I don't ever want to go to a movie with you. But by being able to properly frame it, there was I wasn't let down. I didn't think she was being rude. I didn't think she had a response that was so mature that you couldn't have your feelings hurt. And you also knew that she was okay. She didn't feel like I entrenched or stepped on her toes by asking her. It was okay. And I got to grow up and be like that.
That connects me with another sort of boundary process that I think is really helpful, which is the yes, no, yes. I'm saying yes to myself by saying no to this thing. So what am I saying yes to for myself? What am I saying no to the other person? And then can I offer a different kind of yes? So in your situation with your granddaughter, it might be, so I'm saying yes to myself because that's not one of my interests. I'm saying no to going to the movie. And here's my other yes. No, Grammy, that's not one of my interests, but I would love to do X, Y, or Z with you. Right. And so there can be a way that you say no, but then you extend sort of this olive branch of this yes. And here's what I am willing to do. Here's what I would like to do. Right. And so you don't have to just give a hard no. You don't have to give up your boundary, but you can find a path forward in relationship with that other person. And I think that's really super valuable because it keeps the sort of conversation going.
Yes. And it doesn't just shut everybody down. You're still able to communicate and go through things. We are at the end of time, and like life is now over. No, I'm just kidding. But I do want to make sure that you have shared how, even though it's in the show notes, how does our friend get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can go to my website, healingmindsandhearts.com. And there's a download. I didn't even talk about my book. I do talk a tiny bit about boundaries in there. There's a free download for my book. If you want to schedule a clarity call and we can chat a little bit more about this issue, if it's something you struggle with, I'm happy to do that. And also I'm on Facebook, so you can find me on Facebook. I'll be posting this interview as well as many other interviews that I've done. So that's a great place to come hang out with me as well.
All right. And all those links are in the show notes. So it'll be easy for you to get without having to write it down if you're driving. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, for hanging out. It's such a valuable topic for everybody.
Yes, thank you.
And so, yes. And Elana and I are not medical or mental professionals. We are here for entertainment purposes. People have struggled. People have been there, had crappy lives at times, but made it through. And you can too. You can do this. Our lives are always evolving. Everybody's evolving all the time. Enjoy the ride and stay tuned for the next
episode. Yes, enjoy the ride.
Are you tired of waking up exhausted? You are not alone. If you're looking to take your life back, let's start with the simple step of adjusting your self-talk. Stay tuned for the next episode with your host, Lara Jane. Remember to follow the show so you don't miss a next simple step that you can use to feel more confident. And please leave an honest review.